Hey guys, in this video we're going to go over the basics of SketchUp in 2020. So this is a great video for beginners since we're going to go step by step through the entire Sketch interface and you're going to learn all of the basics which you need in order to create your first design projects in Sketch. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. Welcome to this course. In this first video, we're going to download Sketch. So the very first thing what you have to do is go on sketch.com and then click on the top right try for free option. And as soon as you do that, you're going to be redirected to the screen where basically you want to go on the try your own option and click on download a Mac app trial. As soon as you do that, you can see that Sketch is downloading on your downloads folder, and as soon as it's done, you simply have to click on Sketch and a very quick installation progress is going to happen. And once that is done, you're going to be able to click on the Sketch icon and start using Sketch. So in the very next video, we're going to create our very first document, so stay tuned. Now that Sketch is downloaded on your system, you can be able to see this first window, and the very first thing that you want to do is to double click on new document, and as soon as you do that, a new document is going to appear. If it's not covering the full screen, just double click on the top menu and that will essentially readjust it automatically. Now, as you can see, the very first thing that we can notice is that we don't have anything in the canvas, and in order to create our very first symbol or shape, we're going to leverage this top menu quite a lot, but in particular the very top left menu. So if you click on this arrow and plus button, you can see that here we're going to have all of the shapes. So we can select, for example, a rectangle, and I can click and drag this, and I just created my very first rectangle. Now, in order to give you a brief overview of how to work around in Sketch, well, the very first thing is that if you use your scroll wheel, you're going to be able to go up and down in the Sketch document. Now, if you hold space, you can see that now the cursor has a hand icon, and basically if I left click with my mouse, and I can see that the cursor hand is basically holding onto the artboard. And if I move around, you can see that this enables me to pan around the design file. So you can see that this is pretty much like one of the things which you're going to use all of the time in order to basically move inside your design files. So space plus left mouse key is going to be something which we're going to use all of the time. Now on the top, we can see that we have a toolbar, and we're going to explore all of these options in detail throughout this course. But basically this toolbar is going to be quite useful since we're going to find some of the actions which we're going to use more often. On the left, we have a layers and components, and we're essentially going to be able to create pages directly from here, and all of the layers are going to be managed in this very left section, while on the right we're going to have the properties panel. And by the way, if you don't see this column right here, it's totally fine. This is a plugin which we're going to discuss later on in this video series, so we're going to install it at a later pace. But just to give you context on the properties panel, this is essentially where you're going to change the properties of the selected layers. So as you can see, as I select this rectangle, the properties panel is going to show me all sorts of useful information which I can change, I can edit, I can leverage in order to create the designs which I desire. So this is it for this brief overview. And in this video, I'm going to show you a few options in order to zoom in and zoom out inside of the artboard in Sketch. So the very first thing which you want to keep in mind is that zoom in and zoom out is all relative to an element. So we're going to create an element in order to have the perspective. And one thing that I like to do all of the time is using command and then using the scroll wheel up and down in order to zoom in and zoom out in Sketch. And then I can always use spacebar and left click in order to drag myself around in the canvas. Another option which you have is you can use the zoom in and zoom out tool over here on the top left of the toolbar, and you can always if you deselect an element, you can always just right click on anywhere in the artboard and you can zoom in and zoom out directly from here. Now my best suggestion is to use the scroll wheel, or even better, you can use a touchpad if you have a MacBook Pro, a MacBook, or any Apple device which enables you to have the touchpad, because that's going to enable you to also move horizontally and be very free. But if you don't have it, it's totally fine. You can move with the same efficiency and pace, even if you just have a mouse with the scroll wheel. So this is pretty much it when it comes to this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about artboards in Sketch. So artboards are essentially containing elements which are going to contain your screens and your UI designs. So think about it, for example, if you're looking to create, to design a mobile app, the artboard is going to be the screen in and of itself. So in order to create your first artboard, you can go on the very top left and click on artboard. And by the way, as you can see, some of these elements in the menus have a single letter, and this is a keyboard shortcut. So I can either click here on artboard and start drawing my artboard, or I can use the keyboard shortcut A in order to access the artboard tool. So as you can see, I just dragged and created a artboard. However, we have some really cool features in Sketch, which is basically we can decide a preset device size from the menu on the right. So as you can see, as I selected the artboard tool, I have options to, for example, to use some presets of Apple devices, and I can choose, for example, an iPhone 8. If I just click on iPhone 8, you can see that now I have this preset with the iPhone 8 sizes. I can always change it though at any moment, and I can simply select this option right here, and I will be able to access the menu which you saw just a moment ago again. Now I can also change the orientation. So if I want to change it from portrait to landscape, I can simply click here, and now I have iPhone 8 in landscape mode, and I can browse through many other devices. And if I just click here on A, I can see it over here, and I can browse through the Android devices. I can browse through responsive web presets such as desktop, tablet, and mobile. There's also some social media presets which can come in very handy. So if, for example, you're looking to do a video thumbnail for your YouTube video, you can simply click on video thumbnail, and you're going to have the preset right available over here. You can also use paper sizes in case that you want to create a PDF document or anything of that nature. You can easily do that. And again, if you want to change the sizes at any moment, it's very easy. You simply select the artboard, which you can do directly from here by selecting one of the top sections of the artboard, or you can go on the layers panel on the very left and select an artboard directly. And once you do that, you can see that we have some data regarding the width and the height, and this is in pixels by default. So basically this is telling me that I have an artboard of 418 pixels in width and 419 pixels in height. You can always change it to portrait and landscape, which won't change much visually since it's almost a square. But this is basically something which you can leverage and adjust on the go. You can also see where the artboard is on its X and Y axis in the composition. And there's a cool feature which is adjust content or resize, which if you turn on, I'm just going to create a rectangle. So I clicked on R in order to access the shortcut. And I'm going to create a rectangle right here. I'm going to move this up so it's a little bit bigger. And at the moment, if I select the artboard and I try to resize it, you can see that this rectangle is not changing in shape, it's not resizing. However, if I select adjust content on resize and I do the very same thing, you can see that the content is going to resize based on the adjustments which you're making to the artboard. You can also control the background color, which you can do directly from here. So you can choose any background color that you prefer. And this checkbox, which is include in export, is basically saying that if you export this artboard, the background color is going to be exported as well. However, if you uncheck this, the export is just going to show a transparent or a white background. So this is pretty much it when it comes to artboard, and I'll see you in the next video. Before we move forward, I briefly want to mention how Sketch saves your work, because there is this option which is usually turned on by default under Sketch and Preferences, and this is the autosave option, and I highly recommend you to have it checked because basically this is saying that Sketch is using the Mac OS autosave, so automatically save documents to your Mac as you work. For local documents, autosave also creates a browsable version history. Takes effect at next launch. So this is definitely something which is useful. However, on top of this, I would highly recommend you to get into the habit of saving the document several times as you're working on it. And the reason being is that you're going to have more certainty that when you just finish making some important changes, that the document is actually saved. And as you save a document for the very first time, which as you saw, I just went on File and then Save. There's also this shortcut which I highly recommend you to keep in mind, which is Command+S. I use it all the time, and basically it's giving me two options. The first option by default is saving on my Mac. So as you can see, I can simply rename the file here to whatever name I want. I can also select the location, and here there are some default locations. However, if you click on Other, you're going to be able to see and browse exactly to the folder inside of your Mac which you want to save your Sketch file in. There's also this second option, which is Sketch Cloud. For example, I'm working with a Sketch Cloud team at the moment for a client, and this is saving my documents inside of Sketch Cloud. So it's all going to be in the cloud via internet. And again, I can select, basically select the name which I want to select to save the file, and I can select the workspace. So at the moment I'm working with one client, but if you have multiple clients working within Sketch Cloud, you're going to be able to see it from here. And I can also select the project which I'm working on from here, and then you can always click save in both instances, and your document is going to be saved. So this is pretty much it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about how layers work in Sketch. Now you're going to be able to see all of the layers on the very left, and if I click on shape and then rectangle, I'm going to create my first layer since I have none at the moment. And as you can see, this rectangle layer is visible right here. Now if I just copy this rectangle by using Command C and Command V, so I just created a copy of this rectangle and I move it by using the left mouse key, and I just drag and drop it over here. I'm also going to change the color of these two rectangles since I want to show you something, and this is basically how the layers hierarchy work in Sketch. So the layer which is at the very top, which is red, is the one which is going to be on top of the other layer, which is green. So, but we can always revert these positions, and we can change them by simply holding on green and with the left mouse key, and we can release once we see that line, that blue line on top of red. So basically this is something which enables us to move layers around, and we're going to use it a lot of times. And if I just Command C and Command V again, you can see that I'm able to modify the location of my layers very easily. Just keep notice that if you hover and you release once there is this blue outline of on the layer, you're going to put the layer inside of the layer. So in order to change the hierarchy, you want to see this blue line instead, because that's the hierarchy function. So this is pretty much it. We're also going to explore how layers, lock and hide options work in Sketch in just a moment. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can lock and make layers not visible in Sketch. So the very first thing is you have to go on the very top left. We're going to create a rectangle, and now we're also going to create a oval. And if I hold the shift, you can see that the oval is going to be a perfect circle. Now we're also going to quickly change the colors just so that we can have some visual variety in here. And I'm going to show you this principle, which is, as you can see, if I right click on the actual layer, and I can do it also directly on the layer here, I have this option which is lock layer. Now as soon as I do that, this lock icon is going to appear on the very left panel, and if I try to select the layer directly from the artboard, the canvas, I won't be able to do it because it's the layer is locked. However, I can always go here and click on the lock icon, and this enables me to unlock the layer. Now this is really useful because you're going to probably work with projects with hundreds of layers, and if you're working, for example, on a tedious UI design, sometimes you just want to lock the layers beneath. So this is really going to be useful at times. And another option which you have available in Sketch is you can hide the layer. So if I click on this eye icon, you can see that the current layer is now hidden inside the sketch file. However, we still have it. We cannot select it from the artboard, but if I click on the eye again, you can see that the layer is visible. And again, these are some things which are going to be really useful in certain scenarios, especially when you're working more on complicated projects, being a website, a web app, or a mobile app. That's really something to keep in mind. So this is it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can group layers. Now, from the previous video, we had these two shapes, and if you already deleted them, you can simply create whatever shape you want directly from here on the top left. And as you can see at the moment in the layers panel, we have two separate layers. However, there will be times where we want to group these layers so that if I select any one of these two layers, I'm just going to select the entire group instead of the individual layer. So the way you do it is with the left mouse key, you can simply drag and drop or actually drag and select both layers directly. And you can use this button over here, which is group, and this is essentially creating a group between these two layers. And if I click on the left arrow, you can see that I can always see the individual layers inside of the group. And if I select just one of these layers, I can always edit it and modify the location in space and have access to all of the options I regularly have, even if the layer is not inside of the group. And this can be really useful because as you create more complicated design projects, you're going to be using groups a lot. So definitely something to keep in mind. And if I don't want to use this group anymore, I can always right click on the group and click on ungroup, and now we're not having any group anymore. Now, one thing that I always like to do is to use the keyboard shortcut Command plus G in order to create the group. Or you can always right click and then select group selection. And you can always right click and ungroup. And if I group it one more time again, I'm going to show you this keyboard shortcut to ungroup it, which is Shift plus Command plus G. And I would highly recommend you to start becoming familiar with the keyboard shortcuts, because these are really, really useful. You can massively speed up and make your process more enjoyable and more efficient while working in Sketch. But it's all things which are going to come one step at a time. So just keep it in mind. And yeah, this is pretty much it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next video. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use rulers to make your workflow more efficient and precise in Sketch. So the very first thing which you need are the actual rulers on the top and on the left. Now, if you don't have these activated, it's just going to show like this by default. And in case you forgot where the rulers are, you can always go on search in Sketch, and this is applicable for pretty much any options, any element and action. So we're just going to go over here and start searching rulers. And as you can see, as I hover over these items, these search queries, which I have over here, I'm going to see exactly where the rulers are. So it's under View and under Canvas, click on Show Rulers, or you can always use this keyboard shortcut. And as you can see now, the rulers appear. Now, rulers are really easy to use, and I'm just going to create a oval over here in order to show you exactly. So basically, as I'm hovering over the top ruler or on the left ruler, you can see that these lines are going to be shown as previews. Now, if I click on it, you can see that I just created a ruler, and as you can see, I can create many of these. Now, if I want to modify the location of one of these, I can simply click and hold over one of these, and I can always just move them around, and I can just release in order to keep it in that in that location. I can always drag it to the very top in order to delete it, and I can do the same with these other ones. Or I can always go on a right click on the actual rulers, click on remove all vertical guides, and this is going to remove all of the guides in a very fast way. So if, for example, I have a ton of these and I just want to get rid of them fast, I'm going to right click, remove all vertical guides, right click here, remove all horizontal guides, and we're back in business. So this is pretty much it when it comes to rulers. These are very useful when it comes to doing some very specific and precise work and working perhaps with columns or multiple elements compositions in Sketch. So keep it in mind, and I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to talk about how to add and edit shapes in Sketch. Now, in order to add a shape, you have to go on the very top left on the insert button, and as you can see, the very first option is going to be a shape. Now, we have a few shapes by default available in Sketch. We have the rectangle, the oval, a rounded rectangle, which basically gives you a sense of I'm going to show it directly. You can basically tweak the radius over here, so you can create all sorts of different shapes. Then we also have the line, the arrow, triangle, star, and polygon. Now let's briefly create a few of these. And by the way, if you hold shift as you're creating one of these shapes, you can see that I just created a oval with a ratio of a circle. So essentially, if I don't click shift, I can create the rectangle or the ovals in any ratio that I want. However, the moment I start pressing shift at the same time, you can see that the ratio is basically constrained. So I can create a square, for example. And the same is true pretty much with all of the other shapes. If, for example, I want to create a triangle with a specific ratio of height and width, I can simply leave it like this. But the moment I click shift, I hold shift, I can create I can maintain the same original ratio. So as you can see, we have, for example, the lines, and we can literally grab these elements and add them on top of it. When it comes to the arrows, you will need to add more stroke to the border, and the way you do it is go here on the border and add a bigger value. So essentially you can update it from here. Now the good thing about arrows is that you have a few options over here. So if you want to create, for example, a wireframe with connection points and you want to give that sense, you can definitely change it from here. You can also change the start part of the arrow and the end part, and you can also add dashes on both the lines and the arrows. So basically, if we go over here and we just make the border a little bit thicker and we add a few dashes, you're going to be able to see in just a moment, as we get the right value, that a dashed line is going to be created. Here is also the gap, so basically you can also update the gap in between the lines. And again, you could potentially make an arrow out of a single line just by selecting these options right here. So as you can see, these two elements share some similarities, and for the most part, shapes enable you to create all sorts of different base shapes. You can use the arrows, and or you can create a star. And as you can see, you can also modify some of these elements. So for example, when it comes to the star, you can edit the points, so you can create all sorts of different shapes with more points. These are usually shown on certificates, for example, and things of that nature. So as you can see, you can have some flexibility when it comes to some of these shapes. And let's explore, for example, the polygon tool. If you just create one, you can see that we can adjust the number of sides, and this is actually stuff which is going to be pretty useful, especially when we are going to consider Boolean operations, which is a topic that we're going to discuss later on in this series. But for the most part, these are shapes at bird's eye overview, And if you want to edit them, it's actually pretty easy. You simply have to double click on them, and as you can see, once I double clicked on a shape, these points are going to appear, and basically I can select them and I can edit the location of these points, hence creating a new type of shape. So this can be really useful. I can also select multiple of these points and move them around, and I can also use, if I double click again, I can select one and I can select the other one by holding shift, and as you can see, both of them are being selected at the same time. So this is it when it comes to shapes all at a glance. We're going to explore much more about shapes and other features which are going to enable you to create all sorts of different styles and things like illustrations, icons, and other enhancement when it comes to UI design, UX design, and much more. So I'll see you in the next video. In the previous video we talked about shapes, and in this one we're going to talk about the pen tool and the pencil tool. So the pen tool especially, it's going to be one of the most useful tools that there are out there, and the sketch is called the vector tool. You can also access it by clicking on V on your keyboard, and as you can see, once we select the vector tool, you're going to be able to see this pen icon on the cursor. So basically, if we select and we just click using this vector tool around, you can see that I'm creating these lines. Now, this is one of the ways you can use the vector tool, but one of the most interesting features about the vector tool is the fact that you can actually go ahead and create lines which are curved and vector elements which with all sorts of orientations, and as you can see, we can create literally any type of shape with the vector tool. And in a second stage, once we closed this shape, or you can also always click on ESC in order to deselect the current shape. If I double click and I select one of these points, you can see that now we have these lines. Now, if you already have experience with softwares like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape, you're already familiar with some of these concepts, but basically, to give you an idea, you can move these handles around. You can create all sorts of different curves. You can also hold Command and just move one of these around, so you can basically keep the other handle on the opposite side in the same exact position and just move the other one around. Now, as you can see, we have some options once you selected a point. So we have the option of having it straight, of having this second one, which is essentially reflected on both elements in the same way. We have this one, which basically enables you to do what we just demonstrated without the need of pressing Command. And we also have one more, which is basically, and you can also add points on these vectors. So if you're missing a point, you maybe want to have like some more options and flexibility when it comes to some of these shapes, you can always go in and add points directly. You can also select a point and delete it by simply clicking on the return key, and this is going to enable you to create all sorts of different shapes. If I click ESC again, you can see that, for example, I can add a fill, I can add a border, I can make it thicker, and this is going to be really useful, especially when you're dealing with illustrations or icons and any type of vector results and designs which you want to achieve. So this is it when it comes to the vector tool. We're also going to briefly mention the pencil tool, which is not a tool which you're going to use a whole lot if you're just purely working on websites or UI designs without many illustrations or iconography. But basically the pen tool is the pencil tool is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a pencil, and ideally you want to have a tablet in order to really make the most out of this tool, because with just a mouse or a touchpad it's going to be a little bit tricky to essentially create some precise shapes. But as you can see, a certain level of smoothness is going to be applied by default once you release and you can always go ahead and, for example, make the borders bigger so that there is a little bit less margin for error, at least visible one. So there's all sorts of things that you can do, and if we click on Ask and we double click on this, you can see that the pencil tool essentially is going to create many different vector points. So this is also something to keep in mind and consider. So this is it when it comes to the vector tool and the pencil tool, and I'll see you in the next video. Now that we have a good understanding of shapes and the vector tool and Sketch, let's talk about Boolean operations, since these are going to be really useful in order to create illustrations, icons, and all sorts of designs. So the very first thing that we want to do is to create two shapes. The first one is going to be a rectangle, and the second one is going to be a oval. So we're just going to make the oval right on top of the rectangle, and in order to make the points that we're going to discuss in just a moment clear, we're going to change the color in both of these layers so they are quite visible. So as you can see, pretty basic, we have the oval on top of the rectangle. And in order to access and start using the Boolean operations, we're going to select both the oval and the rectangle. And as you can see at the very top right, we're going to be able to have the Boolean operations. Now, if you don't see these icons, simply click on the right on the toolbar, go on Customize Toolbar, and a dialog box is going to appear, and you can literally drag and drop the Boolean operations anywhere you want inside of the toolbar. Now, since we have the Boolean operations now, we can go ahead and examine the first one, which is union. And basically, as the tooltip suggests, it combines multiple shape layers using a union operation. So if you click, you can see that now the shapes have been combined. Now let's have a look at what happened in the layers panel on the very left. The shapes have been combined. However, if you click on the arrow, you can see that I still have access to both the oval, and I can move it around, as well as the rectangle. So basically this has created one single shape with these combined shapes, but I can always have room for changing and edit these shapes individually. Now let's have a look at the second one, which is subtract. If I click on subtract, you can see that the layer which was on top, which in this case is the oval, has been basically the rectangle has been subtracted by the layer on the top. And again, if we move the order, for example, you can see that the opposite is going to be true. So you can always change and edit these options in a second moment. And let's go ahead and try the intersect. And as you can see, the intersect, it's literally doing what the name is suggesting, which is creating an intersect between the first shape and the second shape. And if you have a look at difference, it's basically the opposite of the intersect, because it's creating almost a hole in between these two elements based on where they were in the space. And again, we can change up, but the order in this case won't matter, because regardless of which layer is above or at the bottom, the intersect is basically cutting off the intersection in between these two layers. So this is it when it comes to the Boolean operations, and I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to talk about masks and how they work in Sketch. Now, in order to create a mask, we're going to add a shape over here, or actually let's create a oval so that the concept is going to be really clear. And I want you to take any image which you have in JPEG or PNG format and add it to your sketch file so that you can see, first of all, how easy it is to add an image in the sketch file. So at this time, I actually downloaded this JPEG image from Unsplash, from a very talented photographer called Will. And basically, I'm just going to drag and drop the image on top of the Sketch software. And as you can see, I can basically see the image over here. I can also go on File and basically like import an image, or actually on Insert and go on Image. And I can select an image wherever I have it on the Mac or PC. And basically this is something which masks are going to be something which you're going to use sparingly, most likely, if you're a UI UX or web designer, but it's definitely an interesting concept to understand. So I'm not going to overlay it completely so that the concept is going to be very clear, but basically you want to select both the image and the oval below, or any type of shape which you have below that, and make sure that the photo is on top of the shape. And now what you're going to do is you're going to click on mask, and as you can see, a mask has been applied on top of the circle. So basically we can see that the photo is above, but again, we can if we select the photo layer, we can move it around, so we still have flexibility. And we can always, you know, move also the mask around. I can use the arrow keys in order to move it around, for example, and or I can just move it around with the mouse. So we still have flexibility, and in case we want to undo this this mask, we can simply go here. Well, the first thing is I'm going to go on Shift Command plus G on the main group, just because I want to not have a group anymore. And now what I'm gonna do in order to undo a mask is I'm going to right click on the photo, and I'm going to click on Ignore Underlaying Mask. And as I'm doing this, you can see that we don't have the arrow anymore, and this photo and this circle below is going to be independent from each other. Now, this is something which, again, can be quite useful, and you can apply it to pretty much any type of shape inside of Sketch. So even if I have a star shape and I put the photo above again, as you can see, actually when you name a layer mask, it's going to be an issue. So I'm going to rename it to circle, because sometimes Sketch just automatically assumes that this is going to be a mask just based on the layer name. So this is something which you want to keep an eye for. And actually, since this was previously a mask, we're going the basically that was the issue. So it's not the layer name always, but that can totally give you a hint that Sketch is considering that as a mask. But basically you have to uncheck the mask again, and basically if you go over here and we select both and we use mask, you can see that also the star is going to be a potential mask. So you can mask pretty much any shape, even vector shapes. It's totally not an issue. And yeah, this is pretty much it when it comes to masks, and I'll see you in the next video. Now let's talk about resizing and scaling inside of Sketch. So let's create a rectangle over here on the center, and as you can see, one of the first options which we have in order to change the width and the height is simply going over here And for example, I can use the shortcut shift and using the arrows up and down in order to modify the width in greater increments of 10. And I can do the same for the height. Now, one really cool thing about Sketch is that you can also use math in these measurements. So if I use, for example, plus 200, it's going to sum 200 to the total number. If, for example, here we put a height of 1000 and I use /2, it's going to, and I click enter, it's going to divide it by 2, so we have 500. But if we do plus 500, it's going to bring it back to 1000. Now I can also use multiplications, which is pretty cool. Using the asterisk, and I'm going to multiply it by 3. I'm going to click enter. As you can see, we're going to have the shape multiplied, the height multiplied by 3. Now, another way you can scale items in Sketch, it's by using the scale tool. So if I keep selecting the rectangle and I click on scale, you can see that this dialog box is going to appear. And basically what this is saying is that we can resize it to a percentage of the current ratio. So if I want to make it 50%, for example, I can simply use shift plus the arrow keys up and down in order to modify this value. I can also go more granular with single units. And of course, I can also change them directly from here, similarly to what we just saw on the right. And the cool thing is that I can also select based on the origin that layer should scale from. So if I want to scale it on the center, I can select it here. If I want to scale it on the bottom left, I can do it like this. So in order to better illustrate this this concept and really make it visually clear, I'm going to create a second rectangle, and I'm going to make this rectangle green. Now I'm also going to bring it up here and enlarge it just a bit, and I'm going to go on the scale tool again, and I'm going to select the top left resize point. So as soon as I do that and I scale it down, you can see that basically it's scaling based on this origin point. Now if I select center, you can see that now it's scaling down based on its center. So this is basically something which can be really useful and can really save a whole lot of time when you're scaling elements. And I personally use it all the time in client work and personal project and whatnot when I'm working in Sketch. So it can definitely be something which is really useful. And one of the last options which we also previously explored is you can always double click on the element. You can select the points which you want to scale, and you can move them around and really you can do pretty much anything with these points. You can move them in space. So this is yet another option to scale elements, and the same is true for pretty much every element in Sketch, no matter what the type. And this is definitely something which you're going to use a lot of times, so keep it in mind, and I'll see you in the next video. In this video we're going to talk about fields in Sketch. Now let's create a rectangle, and let's just make it a little bit bigger, and let's go on the very right, and I'm going to click on this color section right here. So as you can see, this is basically where the fill options are, and if you click on the color, you can well, quite easily change the color directly. You can also extract the hex code, or even use the RGB from here, and the alpha is basically setting the opacity. So if, for example, we're making the alpha with a smaller amount, you can see that the opacity, which you can easily change by going on this scroll bar right here, is going to change. Now, another cool thing about the fill is that we have the eye picker. So basically, if I select this rectangle, I change the color right here, and I click on the eye picker, I can literally go ahead and select the color. Now we're going to simply go ahead and make this one here. But basically, as you can see, this is going to enable you to have all of the options in order to change the colors. And we can go right here and change, for example, the gradients. So basically, this is going to enable us to create all sorts of different type of gradients if we just move these handles. So I'm just going to change the color in order to make this concept even clearer. So whenever I select the gradient, I essentially have these two handles which I can move around. The more I stretch them, the more soft the gradient is going to be between the two colors, and the more I keep them united, the more the gradient is going to be rigid and strong. So this is it when it comes to the gradient. Another cool feature is that you can invert the gradient in one click by simply clicking on this icon right here. You can also rotate the gradient clockwise, so this can really be helpful in some situations in order to avoid having to just move these handles around too much. So that's it when it comes to the gradient, and if we click over here we can see that we still have the gradient, but it's another type of gradient. This is a radial gradient. So basically it's going to work inside a specific radius, which we can change from here. And if we click on this other button, which is not with the connected line, we can see that we can change the shape. So if we want to make it more a stretched ellipse, we can totally do that directly from here. Now another gradient, if you wish, that we can do is the angular. This is not going to be a option which we're going to use a whole lot, especially if you're dealing with basic UI and web design. But nonetheless, it's an option, and we can change the gradients again and add more touch points directly from here in order to create all sorts of different styles and effects, such as, you know, pyramids, view from the top, or, you know, anything that you can think of really. And the very last one is going to be the images. So directly from here I can select an image, and for example I'm going to select this photo which I have on my desktop. I click on open, and as you can see, the image has been applied on top of this rectangle. And I can also change different types. So at the moment, by default, fill image is the default, and if I click on fit, it's essentially going to fit the entire photo, because the original photo is exactly like this. So we're going to have an extra space on the left and on the right of the rectangle. We can also stretch the image, which is something which usually we don't want to do, because it's just going to stretch the image in order to make it fit the entire space of the shape. And we can also tile the image, and we can change the tile size directly from here. We also have some patterns options, which again, we can change the size of the patterns from here. And yeah, this is pretty much it when it comes to fills, and I'll see you in the next video. In the previous video we talked about fills, but in this one let's talk about borders. So the very first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to create a oval in order to illustrate this concept, and I'm going to hold shift in order for you to have a perfect oval. And what we're gonna do next is we're going to uncheck the fills option, and we're just going to keep the borders option selected by default. Now, as you can see, we cannot really see much of this border. However, if we increase the width directly from here, you can see that now the border is going to be visible. and depending on how zoomed in or zoomed out you are and how big is the shape, obviously this value is going to change. In this case we're really zoomed out and I have a value of 199, which is extremely high, but nonetheless whatever value works for you to see the border, that's enough for this tutorial. So let's go over these three options, because this is something which is really important. So let's do one thing, and actually let's add a fill, and I'm going to give it a value of green, and I'm also going to make this border green just for the sake of illustration. I'm going to make it even bigger. So at the moment we have it set at center. However, if you click on inside, you can see that the border now is going to be on the inside of this shape. And if we click on the outside, you can see that now the border is essentially set on the outside section of this shape. So one thing that we can do if we wanted, for example, to convert this to outline, it's actually we can go directly on layers, go and convert to outlines. And as you can see, we have just the border now, so we don't have the initial oval shape. Also in the layers panel, we can see that the paths have been grouped inside an oval. Now we're just going to undo this just because we want to continue talking about borders. So as you can see over here at the bottom, we also have some other options. Usually these are going to be meaningful if we have shapes that we created, for example, with the vector tool and stuff like that. So edges, we really need edges for these to take shape. So let's actually do one thing. Let's go ahead and create a rectangle in order to make this point very clear. So again, I'm going to use a very big border in order to make this very clear, and I'm going to remove the fill, and now on joints I'm going to select this second option, which basically makes the joints around the borders rounded. And of course we can also select this one, which basically is going to almost give this cut in the borders and the angles. Now another cool thing that we can do with borders is we can add dashes, and as you can see, as soon as we add the dashes, we can see that the border is going to be fragmented in between. So we can also adjust the gap, and basically this is going to allow us to adjust the gap between one dash and the other. So this is pretty much it when it comes to borders, and I'll see you in the next video. Create grids in Sketch. So the very first thing that I want you to do is to create a circle from the top left oval, and basically we're going to go and create our first grid by going on Arrange and then click on Make Grid. Now, as you can see, the very first thing that we're going to view is the fact that we have rows and columns, and basically here we can add the number of rows and the number of columns. So if, for example, we want to go with 6 rows and 6 columns and have a 10 pixel margin between these, and you can always click here and just drag, and as you can see, it's a very easy way to basically add more margin or a less margin directly. We're going to enter 30 pixels, then we're going to click on Make Grid. Now as you can see, we're going to have this grid, and a very useful thing that you can do is, since these elements have equal distance between one and another, we can select all of them in a row or in a column, and but just be sure not to have them in a different spacing, and you can select these handlebars and you can move them around very easily. So you can always create different type of effects and move these grids around however you want. So this is pretty much it for this video about grids, and I'll see you in the next one.